guys, it's Jasper, and today I thought it would be fun to talk about some of my favorite Brothers Grimm fairy tales. So as you may or may not know, my main area of research is fairy tales, myth, and folklore. And the book that I am currently writing, I categorize as a fairy tale fantasy novel because it is largely influenced by fairy tales. All that said, I thought it would be fun to share with you a few of my favorite Brother Grimm fairy tales for a bit of insight into what are some of the stories that I love and some of the stories I glean from in my own writing. Now, if you're somebody who knows the stories vaguely, remembers them from books that you read as a kid, I would highly encourage you to go back and find some of the early editions of these fairy tales, because depending on who collected the story or who rewrote the story or which edition of the story it is, there are huge variants. Even within the Brothers Grimm owned stories, there are lots and lots of different versions because the Brothers Grimm, this is a lot to say, the Brothers Grimm themselves published multiple versions, and this was really common for fairy tales because sometimes they publish it and they go, okay, these are a collection so that we can remember this cultural heritage. And then they went, it'd be good if we could publish, because children are reading these, let's publish one that's more for children. So then they would republish it for children, and so on and so on and so on. So there'd be different versions for different audiences, or just for different times. So if you haven't read the stories in a while, I would encourage you to go back. You can find everything online and read some of the original text. Now, without further ado, here are some of my favorite Brothers Grimm fairy tales. So first on my list are two stories in particular that I like kind of for the same sort of reason. The first is Rapunzel and the second is Rumpelstiltskin. Now these are two stories that I really love, and in particular I love the Brothers Grimm version of, because they're two stories where the character who is the villain per se, the witch in Rapunzel, and the little man slash devil worshipper in Rumpelstiltskin are not really villains. They're two characters that make up pretty clear agreements with people. In Rapunzel, she kind of says, like, if you want the cabbage, you have to give me your baby. And they're like, we make a deal! And in Rumpelstiltskin, he says, I'll do this gold, but you have to give me your baby when it's born. And she's like, we'll make a deal! And so they're very interesting stories because the characters who are set up as villains aren't really villains. Although, Rumpelstiltskin might be sacrificing the baby to the devil. It's really like, isn't that the point? The point is, a fair deal was struck, and the point of the story is not necessarily good and bad so much as something else. So those are two stories that I really like because although it sort of seems straightforward, there's quite a bit of complexity going on within them. Now, I thought it would be fun to include some illustrations from the edition of my book, and so here we have illustrations from Rapunzel, the second a little more terrifying than the latter. And here, illustrations for Rumpelstiltskin, a little friendly, and then as the pictures progress, a little not so friendly, as there's a lot of highlights on the moment before Rumpelstiltskin tears himself in two. That's quite a trick. The next story that I really like is The Six Swans. Now this is an interesting story because of the role that our sister heroine has to play in it in redeeming her brothers. There's also some really amazing imagery with the transformation aspect of the boys into swans. And I love me some good, just transformations. I was a big fan of Ovid's Metamorphics, so anytime you have someone changing by magic or shape-shifting, especially animal to human, very interesting and captivating for myself. The next story that I have always loved in sort of like an enchanting sort of way is the story of the 12 Dancing Princesses, or as it's also called, the story of the worn out shoes. This story I love because the Brothers Grimm version is just a very sort of snippet of a story. It's really tiny, but it's a lovely idea of these girls who go away through this portal just to dance with princes, and you know, the father is really upset because he doesn't know where they're going. So it's a very interesting story in the aspect of this sort of magical realm they go into that doesn't really matter so much as a world unto itself, so much as it has like a single purpose. And so that story in particular has been one that has always kind of grabbed my brain. And lastly, my favorite Brothers Grimm story is Fitcher's Bird. Now, Fitcher's Bird is a story that I have actually done a reading of on my channel, so you can go check it out. It's good fun, and I can talk all about it with you. Fitcher's Bird I love for so many reasons. One, it is incredibly graphic, but blunt in its graphicness, and it's so that part is interesting, how the violence is just there and apparent, but also very like blunt, and they're like, it's what happened. What are you gonna do about it? And so the way in which the story deals with violence is very interesting. The other thing that I love about the story is that it is a story about sisters, kind of in a way, but in particular it is about a heroine who nobody really thought too much of and ends up being the one who saves the day. And isn't that the most fun sort of, you know, fairy tale trope we have, where you have the underdog who just like takes the day? And I love in particular how this heroine not only redeems her sisters, herself, but also her community. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I know it's a little different than what I normally do, but today I was sort of just in a little bit of a kind of space, and I thought fairy tales, that's always good and fun. I've been reading a lot of Brothers Grimm with a few of my students, and so I thought it'd be fun to share with you what it is I love in the Brothers Grimm story, highlight some stories. Let me know down below if you've read any of these stories, and in particular, what is your favorite Brothers Grimm story and why? As always, guys, let's be a community of writers who help each other out. Cheers, and pretend that I have a mug. Cheers.